Okay, hello everyone. How are you? It's Monday. We're at work. And you're good? Good. It's funny, I've been walked in here, I saw the big screen of the Buddha walks into the office up there, and I thought, if I were you, I would think I was going to a talk about how meditation is going to help me be better at work. Is that what you guys are thinking? Okay, we're not going to do that. And I totally understand where you might think that. And it does help you. It helps you in many ways. There are all these studies that have been done in terms of people who have only done about 8 weeks of meditation, just little bits of it every day. And over the period of those 8 weeks, they actually were testing their brain activity, and they saw more activity in the ACC, which is the segment of the brain that really regulates self-regulation. So sort of taking away our knee-jerk reactions, slimming those down, more increased gray matter in the hippocampus, which means that they were more resilient, that they had better memory, that they were more focused, that they had reduced stress. So these things are, at this point scientifically proven. I come from a Buddhist background that's been saying, yeah, we've been telling you guys this for 2,600 years. It's great that you did a study a couple years ago. One of my favorite words within the Buddhist tradition is gom, G-O-M. Very simple word. Often is translated as meditation. The more exact translation would be familiarization or becoming familiar with. Meditation is a way to become more familiar with who you are. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Yes, meditation can help you get better at work. But frankly, that just means that you're doing more work and you're better at it. What I'd like to talk to you about is how meditation is actually going to change the way that we work overall, the way that we view our work, the way we consider what is meaningful work. Now that meditation and mindfulness have become such buzzwords and such activity that's even here in your office. I was in Indiegogo a couple months ago. They have a Zen room there. Apparently that's where people go for private phone calls. When they asked me, where can we go to meditate in our office? I said, you have a Zen room. I'm sitting right next to it. What do you do there? Now that it's become so prevalent that we literally have rooms dedicated to it in big corporate institutions, I think it's going to be very tempting for us to say, oh, it's just about me becoming less stressed, which is fine. I'm a firm believer that whatever motivates you to begin a meditation practice, it's good. Less stress, want to work with my strong emotions, I'm going through a difficult time, I think this could help. But the more we meditate, the more we realize it's a practice of becoming familiar with who we are, both the amazing and scary parts of our mind. So how does this actually affect the way we work? This is a big question. A little bit about me. I was raised within the Shambhala Buddhist tradition. I started meditating when I was 6. Started doing meditation retreats when I was 11, then 17, ran off to the monastery in Nova Scotia, shaved my head, took the robes, the whole 9 yards, came back, went to college the next year, and my primary meditation mudra in those initial weeks of college was the keg stand mudra. Maybe you've heard of it, where you literally have your hands on the keg and you're drinking upside down. So I had this moment of really having to find my particular balance between what at the time was work, schoolwork, and also going out and all of these things. And meditation was the through line for me in terms of finding that balance. Finding what we'd often casually refer to as the middle way within the Buddhist world between going to the extreme of going out all the time and really getting stressed out about work and all of these things. I was able to find a sense of balance through the meditation practice. And it was years later that I picked up a book by Pema Chodron. She's a very well-known Buddhist teacher. She's a nun within my particular tradition. And in the opening chapters of When Things Fall Apart, one of her earlier works, she talks about coming home and finding that her husband was leaving her and that she had to get a divorce. And I was going through a heartbreak at the time. I really was at this interesting crossroads. I'd been meditating for some time, and I sort of put a lot of my stock, my happiness stock, in a relationship, and it fell through. So I felt that heartbreak. I could empathize with that, and her teachings were so helpful. In rereading this for what might have been the millionth time, I thought, I haven't gone through a divorce, though. So who's writing about, that first big breakup? Who's not writing about the sort of midlife crisis, but like that quarter life crisis of, I don't know what I want to do with my life? Who's writing about going out with friends on the Friday night? And the more I explored, the less I could find. And I ended up writing my first book, which was called The Buddha Walks into a Bar. And I think what I discovered in that process was that I wasn't alone. There were a lot of people of all ages that wanted to talk about how can we apply the meditation practice to all of the areas of our life. And an interesting thing happens when you write a book called The Buddha Walks into a Bar. I went to 36 cities for that tour. I would never do that again. It's exhausting. If you ever write a book, don't go to 36 cities in like 2 months. It's really too much. But it was also wonderful. I met up with a lot of new friends. I saw a lot of old friends. And they would come to these events. And when you write a book called The Buddha Walks into a Bar, right afterwards, you're ready to collapse and go to sleep. And they say, you know what we should do right now? We should go to a bar. Funny thing happens when you go to a bar with friends. For some of the younger friends, I found that we quickly started talking about that balance of, I'm trying to explore what I want to do, what's personally meaningful for me in work. And for older friends who are a little bit more established in their careers, it was more of, how do I cultivate the qualities I want to actually cultivate in meditation in the workplace? So as soon as we got to the bar, it all became about work. And that's how The Buddha Walks into the Office came about. Specifically, I was traveling, and I was not too far from here. I was giving a talk at Yale, and I was met by a student who was a part of the meditation group. She's showing me around campus, and we popped off for some coffee at a Starbucks. And it came out that she was about to graduate. I'm always very careful with people who are about to graduate. Instead of being like, what are you going to do with your life? I think I said something like, have you thought about where you want to live in a couple months? Are you going to go home, or are you going to move somewhere, and there are friends that you're going to move in with? She said, it's so funny that you ask me these sorts of questions here at a Starbucks, because I want to be the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of Starbucks. I thought, oh, that's very specific. I asked her a bunch of questions about that. I was very curious. And it was really interesting to see how she got to that. And then we'll call her Jessica. Jessica escorted me back to the talk, gave the talk. Afterwards, signing books, talking to people, another woman approached me, also right about to graduate in a couple months. Same question. Have you thought about where you might want to live? Well, I have a couple ideas where I want to live. I have no idea what I want to do, and it terrifies me, and I think that's okay, right? I said, well, tell me more. And she goes, well, all I know is I want to help people. I said, that's great. That's a really good starting point. So I left that university campus. I thought, how interesting. These people were in the same graduating class at the same school. Such different views of what they were going to do. And I started thinking about this. Okay, if we're going to talk about personally meaningful work, these are two people who are meditating. They're going to sit there. They're going to become more familiar with who they are and more familiar with what I would say is their intention for their work. And we'll come back to that in a bit. But we have Jessica, who is going to go out there, and maybe she'll find a good job in marketing after college, and she'll keep rising in the ranks there. And then she'll move over maybe somewhere within the coffee industry, maybe even straight to Starbucks, but eventually she'll get there, and she keeps rising in the ranks of marketing at Starbucks. And all along she's saying, this is what the goal is, right? My sense of happiness comes from this role. Chief Marketing Officer of Starbucks. Now, two things can happen here. One, she gets the job. Or two, she doesn't get the job. So option one, she gets the CMO job after decades of striving for it. And what happens when we get our wish fulfilled in these sorts of ways? She might look over her shoulder and say, oh, I didn't spend a lot of time with my family. I was working so hard. I wish I'd done more of that. Or maybe I didn't start a family of my own along the way. Or maybe it's not paying me what I thought I would get paid. I'm worth more than this. Or maybe I'm working too much. This is too many hours, too much responsibility. I didn't think it would be like this. Or maybe she gets the CMO job and she realizes she doesn't want to be CMO. She wants to be CEO. There are lots of ways that she could get that particular job title and still not feel fulfilled. And then option two, she doesn't get it. She spends decades striving for this particular role, and it doesn't even happen. And I thought this is not a great roadmap for success if we're going to define success as actually finding a sense of happiness or contentment in our work. We can contrast this with Christine. Christine, no clue what she's doing, totally terrified, but she knows she wants to help people. There's 1,000 options for her. She could go become a teacher, she could become a social worker, she could run a nonprofit, she could work here, she could work in a giant company but be the person who's always sticking up for the little guy. There's any number of things she could do if she wants to be of benefit to others. If that is what's going to bring her a sense of contentment or happiness in her work, there's so many options available to her. That roadmap seems very joyous to me. So as I started contemplating these things, as I started contemplating this whole Buddha walks into the office thing, I thought, maybe the question of what we want to do when we grow up, maybe that's outdated. Did anyone get that question when you were a kid? What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be? Yeah. I think a lot of us did. What do you want to do when you grow up? Maybe that's outdated. Maybe the better question today is, who do you want to be when you grow up? And I should qualify this. I don't think at a certain point we just hit a state and we're like, no, I'm a grown-up, right? I think we just continue to grow up, and our idea of what or who we want to be shifts. As Ben Franklin is famous for saying, when you're finished changing, you're finished. So we continue to evolve, we continue to change. Our whole understanding of who we are can continue to adapt as we go through life. But the point of it is, can we bring a sense of intentionality to our work? Can we bring a sense of a singular purpose, if even for today? I'm a firm believer that we always have an intention. And the question is, are we familiar with it or not? To come back to that term, gom. So if you are going out with friends on a Friday night, what's your intention for meeting up with them? Is it because you haven't seen them for a while, you want to connect, you want to share good news, you want to hear their bad news, what's the intention behind going out on a Friday night? Or is it you had a really hard week and you want to just get drunk and forget about it? Because a shot of tequila is not good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So if we have that shot, it might muddy our brain a little, but if we're doing it to connect with friends, et cetera, that takes us down one road. If we're clear about our intention, have a few drinks with friends, reconnect with them, as opposed to, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to go out and get drunk. That takes us down a very different road, where we wake up hungover, not clear what we did, who we made out with, what we did, what we said wrong, we open our phone, who did I text? It's a different road if we're clear about our intention and clear about why we do what we do. And that's a silly example, right? A shot of tequila on a Friday night. But if we're going to take a job here at Google, why are we here? Why are we doing this work? It's long hours. We're here in the New York office, and I have a particular belief that New Yorkers like to work longer than just about anywhere else. So we work long hours. Why? What's our motivation? The why shouldn't be because I have this job title. The why is because you fill in the blank. We shouldn't have to build our career out around what we are, what our particular role is. That might change. In fact, it probably will change. If we can build it out around who we want to be, the qualities we want to cultivate day in and day out, then we can live a life that's actually happier and probably is a benefit to lots of people. One of the things I often encourage people who are contemplating this sort of work-life balance is when you wake up in the morning, you could just, before you even get out of bed, just lay there and think, all right, what do I have to do? Before you go into the stress of like getting nitty-gritty about your schedule, you say, oh, I'm meeting with these sorts of people, seeing this sort of friend after, and then you say, what's my intention for today? What quality do I want to cultivate today? Is it patience, because the people that you're meeting with are very grating? Is it presence, because you actually just want to show up and appreciate them for who they are? Is it gentleness, because you feel like you've been beating yourself up and sort of been manifesting in how you interact with others. What is the quality that you want to cultivate throughout the day? You could even have it as the background of your phone or your computer, put it on a post-it, put it up in the office, and remind yourself, oh right, today I'm actually just trying to be gentle. That would be really significant if I could just be gentle today, to myself and to others. Today I'm trying to be patient. Just reminding ourselves slowly throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, so we're brushing our teeth. I often say brushing our teeth because we often remember to do that, and if we can sort of associate it with something we already remember to do, it becomes easier to do. We can actually reflect on how we did that day. Oh, right, I meant to be patient today. Did that happen? Probably not. Okay. If it didn't happen, tomorrow's a new day. New intention, maybe the same intention. If it did happen, we should celebrate. We should acknowledge that. We should just have a moment of appreciation for the fact that we're cultivating the qualities that we would normally cultivate on the meditation cushion in the rest of our life. And this is really, for me, the beauty of the meditation practice, that because we are becoming more familiar with who we are as we meditate, we become more familiar with both the aspects of our life that we want to cultivate and the aspects of our life that we might actually need to cut out a little bit. And we can have the discipline to follow through in our day-to-day life. I'd like to actually do a meditation and exercise with you all, if you'll indulge me. At this point, there are a lot of people here, so we have notepads in the center, but maybe not everyone can have a notepad. Maybe we can take pieces of paper and pass it on. I love that people come, this is one of those places that everyone comes in with like their laptop, but no one has pen and paper, so we have pen and paper for you. And as those pass through, I'll just say a little bit about what we're going to do together. So everyone just grab at least one piece of paper and a pen. We're going to engage in an exercise that we commonly do at the nonprofit I founded a few years ago, the Institute for Compassionate Leadership. So the Institute for Compassionate Leadership, or as ICL as we call it, is a 6-month training program for these sorts of people. The sort of people that say, I want to go out and I want to help the world, and I have no effing clue what that means. So we put them through a program where they receive meditation training and related exercises like deep listening, empathy training. We match that with community organizing training so that when they get off the meditation cushion, they can go into their communities and effectively empower and work with others. And just practical leadership skills that aren't taught in university these days, like how to fundraise, how to negotiate, how to give and receive feedback, how to run a meeting. And over the 6-month part-time program with the Institute for Compassionate Leadership, people get very clear on how they're going to help the world, what that career decision really looks like, and they actually develop the confidence that they have everything, both within the tools we give them, but also internally, to go out and do that work. This is the first exercise we do with them. I'm going to lead us through it. This is the way that we actually map out our intention. So we'll begin with a few minutes of what is called shamatha, or calm abiding meditation, and then I'll move us through a guided contemplation, and we'll do it somewhat quickly because I want to allow some time for Q&A. But for people who may be watching this as a recording, you could even take longer for the shamatha, the calm abiding meditation, longer for some of the exercises, and it could last a full 45 minutes on its own, really. So let's begin. For those of you who are seated in a chair, you can just sit with a little bit away from the back of the chair, with your feet firmly on the ground. And for those of you on the ground, you can sit with your legs loosely crossed. For those of you standing, you can just do what I'm doing, which is slightly bend your knees. But in all these cases, we make a firm connection with the earth underneath us. Feeling our sits bones digging into the chair or the floor, or our feet digging into the earth. And from this strong base, we actually elongate upward through the spine. So don't lift up through your shoulders. Literally feel as if there is a string at the top of your head pulling you straight up. So the spine can actually be like a stack of quarters, one on top of the other. Relaxing the muscles in our shoulders and in our back. If you're standing, you can just let your hands fall at your sides. If you are seated, you can pick them up at the elbows and drop them palms down on the thighs. This is to promote resting energy, and it also provides extra support for our back. For many of us, we're used to slouching. So hopefully this will give you a little bit of extra support. The chin just rests at the top of the spine, tucking in the chin ever so slightly. And bring a sense of relaxation to the muscles in your face. Relaxing the jaw so the jaw hangs open. You can place your tongue up against the roof of your mouth, which slows down the swallowing process, which can be distracting. Allows for clear breathing. This particular practice is one within which we wake up to what is going on in this very moment. We wake up to the present moment. So let's actually keep our eyes open since we are attempting to wake up. You can rest your gaze 2 to 4 feet ahead of you on the ground in a loose and unfocused manner. The object of our meditation is the breath. Both the physical sensation of the out-breath and the in-breath. So you don't need to change or alter your breathing at all, just allow it to occur, as it always does. In fact, the only difference between now and the rest of our day is that we're paying full attention to it. So just feel the breath as it cycles through your body. And when you notice that your mind drifts off into thinking about the past, perhaps a conversation you had earlier in the day, or the future, the plans for tonight, the things you need to accomplish, just come back to the breath. Let it anchor you in the present moment. The breath is always fresh. It is always what is going on right now. If it's helpful, you could even gently say, thinking, to yourself. When a big thought comes up, we just acknowledge it. We don't say it's a good thought or a bad thought. We just say, thinking. Return our focus to the breath. Now, I would like to ask that we shift our focus to a contemplation. We'll just hold a simple question in mind and come back to it in the same manner that we are coming back to the breath. What quality would I like to cultivate in my life? Just notice whatever responses may come up to the simple question. Let them wash over you like a wave. And when you notice that you've gotten distracted from the question, come back to it. What quality would I like to cultivate in my life? What quality would I like to cultivate in my life? Okay, you can raise your gaze. And what I'd like to ask at this point is, in the corner of your paper, just jot down a few of those responses that came up, those qualities. No one will see this but you, unless you upload it to Google, in which case I feel like everyone can see it. Just a few will do. And now I'm going to ask you to draw in the entirety of your page a series of concentric circles. 4 or 5 will do. So one in the center, and then another one around it, and then another one around that, and then one more around that. So just a series. It looks like almost a bullseye, right? Bullseye with the dartboard. Can I borrow your piece of paper? So for those of you who are visual learners, this is a perfect example, she gets an A, of what I'm talking about. Thank you. Within the Buddhist tradition, there is something called a mandala. And people may have heard of it if you're House of Cards fans. People saw the mandala, sand mandala, very elaborate. Went on for weeks or months, and then they tossed it. Often these are depicted in lasting form in what are known as tankas, paintings. And in the center, there is a central deity or a lineage figure. And then in the next circle out, there's various manifestations of that deity or lineage figure, different parts of their life, different aspects of who they are, and it continues on and on until all sentient beings are represented. In particular, I like to use the example of the wheel of life because it has passion, aggression, ignorance at the center, and then there's different ways that our ego plays it out and the different realms that we're said to be born in, and so on and so forth. So it gets very vast at a certain point. But there's always something at the center. Our lives are a mandala, and there's always something at the center. And we are either consciously aware of it or we are unconsciously living it. It could be our job title. A lot of times it is our job title. If we're just sort of going through life and not paying much attention to our intentions, it might be our specific role, author, nonprofit director, whatever. And then you build your life out around that because that's the primary way that you spend your hours. CMO of Starbucks. Then you build your life out around it. What I'd like to ask is that you look at that list of qualities that you just jotted down and see if one of them stands out. And when it does, write that at the center of the mandala. Now I'd like to invite you to contemplate all of the other amazing things that are in your life. Your family, your friends, your work. Your work can certainly be part of this. Your extracurricular activities. Do you like to read? Do you go to museums? Do you sing opera? Do you go to the ballet? Do you run? Do you do yoga? Do you meditate? And however significant these things are to you in your life, the closer they are to the center of that mandala. So if you're very close with your mom, she's in that next circle out. If you're not very close with your mom, she's farther out. If it's just as you sort of jot down, start free associating with some of these things, there's someone that is in your life, a good friend, but you haven't seen them forever, maybe they're further out right now. We're not evaluating where we think they should be. It's just sort of looking at the reality of our situation. Where are the beings and the activities in our life? Just jotting down a whole bunch. Maybe even 10 to 20 would do. Just real free association. If you're having trouble, you can even just think about the people and things that you've done in the last week. That's often a good indicator. So the more significant they are to you, the closer they are to the center. The less significant they are, farther out. We're not trying to judge. If your mother's in your third circle out, I'm not going to know. Just you. It's fine. Do you have pets? You could put pets in there. Volunteer activities you might be engaged in, you can put that in there. Do you go biking? Do you run? Do you have an eccentric hobby? And then when you're ready, I want to invite you to draw a thin line from the center of that mandala out to those things that you just wrote down. Just a very thin line. So line, if you have kindness at the center of your mandala, you just draw a small line out to your mother, to running, to your close friend. So as we map out this mandala of our life, with a quality that we want to cultivate at the center of it, what shifts? What changes? So if you were to infuse, I'll continue with the example I gave, kindness into these various areas of your life, what would that look like? So in the example of drawing that line from kindness to my mother, it means that when my mother calls, I should pick up. That would be good of me. I shouldn't just put it off for when I feel it's best. It's kindness to actually pick up, I'm available. Whatever comes to mind, just starting to map out, you could just jot it down. I realize that your mandala is about to become very crowded with all these long phrases, but just little notes. Pick up phone. What does kindness mean injected into your exercise schedule? What does kindness mean in relationship to those friends that you have mapped out? What does kindness mean in relationship to how you take care of your body or how you eat? Whatever is on the piece of paper right now, just making a simple note of ways that you would inject your quality at the center, not kindness if it's not kindness, gentleness, patience, generosity, whatever you have written down, how do you inject that into that relationship more than you already have? How can you go further with cultivating that quality in relationship to all of these things in your life? When you're ready, I'd like to invite you to return to the basic shamatha practice that we were doing before. You don't have to rush if you're still writing, but when you are done writing, reconnecting to that meditation posture that we reviewed before, and then reconnecting to the breath. Okay, you can raise your gaze once more and come back to the group. In the Tibetan tradition, we say many short sessions within a day. That's the way to enlightenment. So lots of little periods of meditation. The more we start to build our life out around the qualities we want to cultivate in our life, the more contentment we will find. The more we're actually just tuning in to what we actually see as the source of happiness. And we're less directed by just the external factors that exist in our world. We're not putting those in the center of the mandala, my job title. We're actually building our life out around something that feels personally meaningful to us. And this is how meditation will actually help us discover who we want to be. We'll become familiar with who we want to be, as opposed to just what we want to do, the activity that busies our life. That way, we could collect garbage for a living, or we could run a hedge fund. But we are being who we want to be at work. We always have that opportunity to cultivate the qualities that we want to see in ourselves and in the world, in our life. So thank you so much for joining with me for the Buddha Walks into the Office and experimenting with this contemplation that we do at the Institute for Compassionate Leadership. I'd love to hear what questions or reflections you may have on that.
What you said sort of resonated with me, but life is really busy. I don't know how to put this in perspective as of running through life, doing the kind of things that are required of me at a given moment.
So, what's your name? It's a beautiful question. It's like, okay, this is fine and good, but my life is really effing busy. So my theory is holding weight, right? We are actually very busy. We do work long hours here. I remember years ago, my teacher, Sakyang Mipham Rinpoche, he was giving a very traditional Buddhist talk, and they started talking about the power of prayer. And I was like, what is going on here? It's become very Christian for me. And I started getting really inquisitive. And what I realized he was saying is, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to voice an aspiration. To actually just give voice to, I want to be kind. I want to be patient. I want to do that today. And just saying it, or in our case, what we just did is actually writing it out. Not just writing it out, but writing out all the ways we could do it, reminds us that we can do it differently than we normally do. This is us literally mapping out different things we could do within one given day to cultivate that quality that we want to cultivate. And as I mentioned, there are many ways we could remind ourselves beyond this. It's not, if you want, you could pin this to your desk or something like that, but you could also write out the quality that you want to cultivate. You could have it pop up as a reminder on your calendar. You can have a timer on your phone go off and remind you. One of the things I do when I notice I'm working on one project for a really long period of time is I set a timer on the phone to go off. And I'll work away, if I'm writing a book or something, working away, and the timer goes off, and I close the laptop, and I raise my gaze, and I just reconnect to the breath. I cut through the habitual speed of the day-to-day momentum. Reconnect. Then after 30 seconds, a minute, I notice I start to get busy, I should get back to work, I open the laptop, I reset the phone, an hour later I do it again. And that way I actually slowed down in little ways throughout the day. And that helps me remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. Is that helpful? It's worth experimenting with. We can get very tricky with ourselves, because our mind is very tricky. It wants to speed up and just get distracted and do all sorts of things. We can get tricky with how we can focus it too. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
Yeah, so I get this idea of cultivating the quality in your life over a longer period of time, but can you talk more about how you can cultivate those qualities, like daily qualities? Mm-hmm. And do you recommend trying new things? I want to practically be patient today, even if it kind of deviates from the longer term quality you want to cultivate.
Yeah. This exercise we do, as I mentioned, I do at the beginning of the 6-month program for the Institute for Compassionate Leadership. I also often do it around New Year's, because people want to set a resolution. It's always lose weight, not gain weight. I don't think many people have that one. Lose weight. But that's actually part of a larger motivation for what we want to do in terms of taking care of ourselves, and et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes we put the cart before the horse. We could do this exercise even on a daily basis, or we could just wake up in the morning and say, all right, what's coming up for me? How can I bring out the things that I need to bring out today in myself? The Buddhist point of view is that we actually have everything we need within us. So the Buddha was a human being, like you and me. And he came from a life of a lot of luxury, and then once he realized that there was suffering in the world, he was very cloistered, very sheltered. He didn't realize that, so once he realized it, he actually went to the opposite extreme, life of real asceticism, literally torturing himself in the name of spirituality. And as I mentioned earlier, he gradually found a middle way between those two. And when he did that, he discovered that he was awake. Not that he could be awake, it's that he was awake and that he was confused, but then he can actually discover and have confidence in his natural wakefulness. So it's said that we all possess the same thing that he did, what we would call Tathagata Garbha, which is Buddha nature. We all possess Buddha nature. It's not like he was better than us or something like that. It's just he discovered it, and then he laid out this path and this practice. The practice he did 2,600 years ago is the same practice we started off with today. So we can go through this practice of becoming familiar with who we are. The more we look, the more we discover that there's some sense of peace, some semblance of peace right at the center of who we are, beyond all of the confusion and the distraction and the busyness and all of the things that get in our head throughout the day. Within the Shambhala tradition, we sometimes call this that we're basically good. We're basically wise, we're basically kind, we're basically strong, we're basically capable, we're basically worthy. We're basically able to accommodate whatever vicissitudes life throws at us. So sometimes it's a little overwhelming to say, oh, I wake up, I want to be patient, and then I go into my day and I act like a jerk. But we have this wellspring within us that we can always touch in with. So the more we meditate, the easier it becomes to just come back to the sense of peaceful abiding, the calm abiding, which is literally the name of the meditation practice we're doing. So the more we discover that, the more we can have confidence in that, the more we can actually bring it out into our day-to-day life. And that's how we make these intentions really strong and powerful. So that's my advice. This is a long-winded way of saying we should probably meditate more. No surprise there coming from me. Thank you for that question, though. Others? Yeah.
Meditation helps for work for sure, but on the other hand, when you do meditate a lot, it also conflicts with craving for success, going higher, competing with others, and those are the things that big companies need these days for bigger achievements. So you need to be hungry for success, hungry for going higher. So that conflicts with meditation, right?
So the question is, meditation, all nice and good in the workplace, but at some point, what we're not sitting here talking about ambition, sort of achieving more, doing more, creating more so that the business thrives, etc. So isn't there a conflict here? And it's a really good question. I have a few answers. The first is, whatever our version of more is, there's always going to be more above that, right? So in the example of our friend Jessica, she becomes CMO, she's become very ambitious, she gets that great title, there's going to be more that she wants. This is just the nature of what we would call within Buddhism the cycle of suffering, samsara. There's always going to be more. So what I'm asking us to do is to consider success, even at a corporate level, as something other than getting bigger. We have this society that says, well, you should always be doing more. It's not good enough that you have this job, you should have another job that's better. It's not good enough that you have the iPhone 5, you should have an iPhone 6 at this point. Right? There's always going to be something more that we can get, and then when we get it, we will want something else. So that's suffering. That's the very nature of suffering that we're talking about. So is this expected in us for business? Yes and no. I have a theory that I'd like to present today that I've just been recently contemplating, and it's based on something that my teacher Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche said. He said sometimes when we talk about society, we can get easily overwhelmed because we are talking about, I'm here in New York, there's suffering because of the earthquake in Nepal, and there's suffering in Baltimore, and there's all these things, and I'm not there, what can I do? And we become disheartened. And he said, society could actually just be two people sitting down and having tea. That's a society right there. So if you and I had tea, and we had an hour together, we sipped our tea, we were actually present with it, we talked about things that really mattered to us, that would be one type of society that you and I created for an hour. Or we could sit down and get distracted on our phones, not really pay attention to the tea, and occasionally look up and talk poorly about others and slander them and say what a jerk they are. And that's a whole other type of society that you and I create for 1 hour. We are always creating society. This is my theory. So if society can just be two people sitting down and having tea, we have 50% stakeholder in that society. I work with a lot of meditation students one-on-one, and there's a woman who's a nurse practitioner in Minnesota, and her name is Nicole, and Nicole is 1/10 of her private practice. There's 10 people that work there. So I said, you are 1/10 of this society. So sometimes when we go to work, and I don't mean to pick on Nicole, she's a wonderful human being and an excellent meditator and all of these things. Sometimes when we go to work, we say, this is the way things are. I got to sort of, how do I put up with it? How do I put up with the ambition thing? How do I put up with the speed thing? That things that people are always expecting more of me. People want me to work longer hours, whatever it might be. And instead of saying, how do I put up with this society? I'd like to ask, how do you create that society? So in Nicole's case, she's 1/10 of it. So she sits down with one person and says, it seems like we all continue to email each other after 10 o'clock at night. Do you like that? I don't like that. And that person says, no, I don't like that either. All of a sudden, 20% of that society wants to put down their email after a certain hour. And then maybe they talk to a third person. And then 30% of that society doesn't want to do it. And this is how we actually create change within cultures. Through conversation, through genuinely showing up with someone and sharing our heart in that way. This is counter to what a lot of our corporate society encourages. But I think in a company like this, it would be understood and respected. That we could show up and voice how we would like to see a society like this run. Because Google is a society. You guys know this. And you wield incredible power in society overall. So even just starting with a conversation with a coworker could have tremendous results worldwide. We live in an interconnected society, and you guys know this very well. I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't already know. In fact, if I had to define the job description of Buddhist meditation teachers, telling people things they already know. Oh, I can just meditate and be present? That's interesting. But I digress. You guys have an amazing ability to connect with many people, even within today, even within this room. We can start here and say, maybe my version of ambition is to create a culture of kindness. Maybe my version of ambition is to have us all be very gentle with each other, to encourage patience. And then even within the one meeting we run every week, that starts to ripple out, and other people say, I want to do that too. And then that influences Google as a company and influences people in their homes. And the way I pulled this from is a story at the time of the Buddha. And this is, I guess I'll end on this one. I'm looking at our time. There's a story at the time of the Buddha that there was a king known as Dawa Zangpo. And he heard tell of the Buddha. I don't know how people heard of each other in those days. Maybe he saw his video on YouTube, who's to say. But he decides that he needs to study with this great meditation master. So he travels a great distance, and when he arrives, he's a little disheartened because he realizes that all of the Buddha's followers are monastics at that time. And he can't do it. So he goes to the Buddha and he says, I have this entire kingdom of people relying on me. What can I do? I can't become a monk, but I want to receive teachings. And instead, the Buddha asked all of his monastic followers to leave the room, and he imparted what's known now as the Kalachakra Tantra on King Dawa Zangpo. These are teachings on mindfulness and compassion. Some of the same teachings we offer at the Institute for Compassionate Leadership. And it said that King Dawa Zangpo went back to his kingdom and he started talking to people, he started meditating, and he would be in a meeting with his ministers of education, and he would say, how can we get people to be more present in our education system? And they would all say, oh, this is interesting. They'd have that sort of conversation. And then ultimately, the more they talked about it, the larger the ramifications were, because in the schools of that kingdom, people were actually starting to talk about mindfulness and compassion. And then he would meet with his generals and he would say, okay, how can we take care of our troops? How can we support them best? And it's just such a different question what they might have already had. So there would be conversations around that, and that would affect the whole army. And then he would have questions around the major doctors in the area. He would gather them together and he would talk to them, and all of a sudden the medical system would be transformed with the idea of deep care for the patients. And yes, he was a king, but it said that just through conversation, he was able to influence this giant kingdom. It's not like he came in and said, we're now a Buddhist kingdom. No, it wasn't this top-down thing. It was organic. It was conversations amongst people. And this is a kingdom, and it's legendary. It may or may not have existed, but it was known as Shambhala. So that's the template from which this particular Buddhist tradition I practice in flourishes. We come from that tradition of maybe if we can show up one-on-one and just be with people, be authentic with them, share our heart, maybe real change can be created in our world. So thank you very much for your question, and thank you all so much for having me here at Google.